Hey, but how y'all doing today?
Good, good.
I want to talk about Malcolm X. I love Malcolm X, and I think a lot of people been miseducated about him. Because Malcolm X was about to change America and probably would have impacted the world. But when we hear of Malcolm X, we hear his any means necessary speech or the things before he became Muslim. And that is what we hold on to. But Malcolm did a beautiful thing. He did an evolution. He reinvented himself. And I think for a black man, he's a great example for us who didn't start our lives out as nicely as we wanted to, but found the wisdom and the courage to reinvent ourselves. When Malcolm went to Africa, he visited with a lot of African countries. And they successfully, some of them successfully got the oppressors out of their country. And like the Dutch, Germany, England. And Malcolm asked them, how did you do this? How did you make this happen? And they said, well, the first thing we did, we stopped fighting with one another. Because we realized we was weakening ourselves and helping the oppressors to oppress us. And we both had the same goal, and that was freedom. So we called a truce to the violence against each other. He said, second thing that we stopped calling our problem a civil rights problem. Because when you deal with civil rights, you're basically saying it is my neighbor, I'm having a disagreement with my neighbor. And we will handle this in the legal system within the courts or a mediator. And whatever the courts decide, that's what it is. But a lot of the oppressors placed people in the court systems. Even our own people was there, but they was influenced by the oppressors. So it was no win for us. We would get little pieces of justice, but no true justice. So the third thing he did, and was the most important, he said we start calling our problem a human problem. Because under the law I think it started in 1948, you got international human rights that governs everybody. And they start saying that their oppressors are committing genocide, incarcerating us without provocation, keeping us from having food, water, adequate health care, education. Malcolm was like, that's the same thing we go through in America. You are going through the exactly same thing. You went through the exactly same thing as we're going through right now. So when Malcolm came back to America, if you ever seen a movie, Malcolm X with Denzel Washington, that's the only one I really can give you a good correlation to. When Malcolm came back, he did an impromptu interview. And Malcolm said, I'd like to first say, I apologize to any civil rights leader that I have offended in the past. I am willing to work with you if you are willing to work with me. Because he wanted to end that separation of the groups. So then Malcolm spoke about, he started the Organization of African Unity. Because he wanted the African people to know that the African American people was going through the same thing. That we had no knowledge, really, of what they go. I didn't know about apartheid until they started talking about Nelson Mandela. We had no knowledge of what they was going through, and they really had no knowledge of what we was going through. So he wanted to build that relationship with our home. So, in that movie, Malcolm was on the phone with his wife and his plane couldn't take off. Malcolm told his wife, hey, I work with the nation. I trained them. This is beyond what they are able to do. They are getting help. Because when Malcolm was going to speak at was London, he's going to the United Nations because a brother named Pinto and a few other African countries had sponsored him to be able to speak at the United Nations so he can bring up the fact of the human rights violations against America, which would put them on the spotlight to get sanctions upon America to force them to make a change to their policies against the African and minority people. So instead of Barack Obama being our first black president, he probably been our second or third by now. We probably would have had a minority by now. We probably would have had a woman by now. He was going to change the world. I think Malcolm's mistake was he didn't know that the CIA probably was listening and knew what he was planning on doing. One thing that you always would count on with America that I found in my research, you mess with their money, you're messing with them. And if you would have got them to put sanctions on America to force a change and not piece it out, Brown versus the Board of Education, oh yeah, you can live over here now, oh yeah, you can drink from this water fountain now. Everything at once. I don't think America was going to be ready for that. So Malcolm wasn't violent. He wasn't angry. He was mad and disappointed. He never was a part of a riot. He was a good brother that wanted to make a change in the whole world. So I'm going to read his piece of his last speech. This Malcolm X at the United Nations in 1963. In July of 1964, Malcolm X attended the second meeting of the Organization of African Unity. He presented a petition asking the interests of world peace. We beseech the heads of the independent African states to recommend an immediate investigation into our problem by the United Nations Commissions on Human Rights. According to the United Nations procedures, a nation can request a human rights investigation of another country on behalf of the people whose rights has been violated. The African heads of the state discussed a proposition at the OAU summit, but failed to bring the case before the United Nations based on a part of the pressure of the United States Department. Malcolm got assassinated, which was convenient because they made it look like a murder. And actually the brother named Pinto who helped Malcolm, they killed him the same day. Peace.